All right, guys, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Just put yourselves on mute. Okay. Okay, everybody's on mute. I'm going to get started. There were a few people that battled to come on the last session, so I'm going to fly through it within 5 minutes and then just get that absolutely over and done with. So what happened, Shane, Dory, I think you were sick, you weren't well at all, and I hope you're feeling better. I know Kevin also had the dentist and one or two other people were not well. So the Gemara starts off and it says, look, what is the Tana referring to in our Mishnah? Because the question in the Mishnah, it says, from when may we fulfill the obligation to recite the Shema in the evening? Now, there's a problem, because if I turn around and say to you, like Dory, when are we meeting? Your first question is, well, what are we meeting about? And, I don't know anything about it. So the problem with the presupposition of asking when is it implies that there's an obligation in the first place to recite the Shema. So we don't have necessarily any Gemaras that discuss it. So the Gemara wants to know, well, before you can discuss when, what's that presupposition? And it's actually in the verses of the Shema itself. Because as you learn, it contains the instructions thereof. So, for example, the Gemara goes on and teaches and says, furthermore, why does the Tana teach the law regarding the Shema of the evening first? Let him teach the laws regarding the Shema of the morning first. And the reason why the Gemara presupposes that is pretty simple, is that if you look in Exodus chapter 29, verse 39, I'm sorry if I often use the English term, but I grew up secular, but we know it's Shmot. It looks as the quintessential case of a Tamid offering. And it was funny, Kevin and I were at Simeon Shapiro, and the rabbi of, what was it, 9th Street Shul or Pound Street Shul, Kevin, whichever shul, Rabbi Hadar, Pound Street Shul, says that one of the most important obligations is the daily Tamid offering, and it's something we should learn about every day. And that teaches it in the order of how we behave, of our routine, and that routine is in the morning and in the afternoon. So the Gemara is suggesting here, why don't we learn it in exactly that same order of how one begins the day and how you go to sleep, human behavior. So the Gemara says it can't learn like that. Because when you look at the word of shachbacha, of kumecha, the instructions are there when you lie down and when you arise. The instructions themselves are in Shema in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7. And therefore, that's what the Mishnah follows. And the instruction is first lying down, and then it deals with getting up. So it says, from that time, the Kohanim who were Tameh may enter to eat their terumah. So that's the Tana's point of reference, and we're going to see why that was even mentioned, because you don't actually necessarily need it. Then Gavin Stoller came up with the right suggestion, and he said, listen, you don't even need that. All you need to know is that's how we observe Chagim, is that when you observe Pesach, it's Erev Pesach, and then the next day is first day Pesach, and then Chutz La'aretz second night and second day. And the Gemara is in agreement with Gavin, is you don't even need the wording of the Shema to teach you that. All you need to know is V'yehi erev v'yehi voker yom echad, and there was evening and there was morning one day in Genesis. So we see from the order of creation that the daily cycle begins with night and ends with the day. So you don't even need that as a further explanation. So the Gemara says, well, if so, that you can just use the creation of the world as the flow. Firstly, that's not how it deals with the Tamid offering. And secondly, if you look at the Tana, and even if you put that aside, and you look at the 11th daf of the Mishnah in Berachos, the Tana that gives those instructions starts with the morning by saying there's 2 blessings you recite before the Shema and 1 blessing afterwards. And in the evening, the Tana says you recite 2 blessings before the Shema and 2 blessings after it. So it says, so if the Tana is there explaining it in regard to human behavior, Why doesn't it mention it in this particular case? Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. So the Gemara answers is yes, but actually, if you look at the 11th daf, the Tana starts off by talking about the evening Shema, exactly in the way that the pasuk says, "And when you lie down," and also talks about with creation starting at night as being the first counting of the day. And while he's teaching the evening Shema, he then goes on and says, "This is the morning Shema." And his students, his Talmidim, turned around and said, "Well, are there any brachas before the Shema? Are there any brachas after the Shema?" And once he explains all those halachic matters, he says, "Okay, so we've done all the pre and post brachas of the Shema, and let's go back to the evening and explain those details in terms of the pre and post brachas." But the way he actually expounded it originally, before he went into detail, was exactly as Gavin Stoller suggested, and the Gemara with the wording of the Shema. Okay, so then what we did do is we said, okay, if we look at the master of the Mishnah, it mentions this odd point. It says, when are we entitled, when is the earliest you can say the Shema? And it says, from the time that the Kohanim who are Tameh may enter to eat their teruma. Okay? And what is that time? From the time the stars appear in the evening. Guys, I tell you what, I get less good looking as I get older. And what I want to do with the recording is I actually want to, I'm sick and tired of seeing me. So what I'm trying to do is I want the spotlight for everybody. And I want you guys in future to tell me that. Please, I want us all to be in this year because we've all aged since we've been given in the last 5 years. So as long as we all look old together, I'm happy. Okay? So just remind me to go to spotlight in the beginning of the show. I'm sick of seeing me. I'm sick of my own voice. Anyway, I sound a bit squeaky. I wish I had like an R&B sort of voice like James Earl Jones, but I've got a voice for newspaper and a face for radio. What can I do? All right. That being the case, let's go on. So it's saying like kind of what's the point of mentioning this? Quite simply, you can turn around and say the time for Shema is when 3 stars come out. What are you mentioning for that you have to wait for the Kohanim to immerse themselves and then for the 3 stars to appear because if they're in a case of impurity before they can eat their teruma? Gavin, what was the answer? Stoller? Since you asked it.
Just ask the question again. I think I did hear it.
Okay, you can. What do you have to
Just,
say?
no, just ask the question again. Ask the question.
I'm asking the question. The
Right.
Gemara is saying all you have to say is the earliest time to do Shema is when the 3 stars come out, the 3 - stars come out. What are you mentioning this whole thing with the that it has to align with the Kohanim and the immersion and coming out and waiting for 3 stars to appear before they free from their tumah and they can eat their teruma, even though the daily sacrifice is the next day. Why mention it? What's the point? What does it wish to teach
Why
us?
the mention?
Yeah, you asked me that
It,
the other day, and I went into it.
yeah, well, I don't remember exactly what I asked you, but I mean, it's in essence, I mean, you have to have parameters. You have to know when you can start, when you can end. So you got the 3 stars as an indication of when you can, well, when you have to be. The 3 stars is when you can say the Shema. You can't say it before that.
Correct, but
Damon,
maybe let me ask Lance.
I,
Lance's actual voice. What's the reason it brings up the Kohanim?
because they want to teach about the Kohanim. This is not opportune time.
Absolutely. So Gavin does, by the way, he knows exactly what's going on, but sometimes, like me, he suffers from fibromyalgia. He's got that, and he's got fatigue, but he does know what's going on 100%. It's just he's not feeling 100% well. And it's exactly as Lance said and Gavin said the other day. So, Dory, what the Gemara often does is it goes on a divergent path. And what does that mean? If we look at Bava Kama, we started off with the Torah and Avos of Shabbos. Okay, and it mentions when it talks about Torah and Avos, which is your categories and subcategories, the Avos, the categories, and the Torahs are your subcategories. And it said, listen, As far as an ox damaging another ox, these are the major categories and these are the subcategories. So it mentions it was Shabbos, and then it goes on and it says, it talks about what you call indiscernible damage. So, firstly, we have to pay for damage as we call. But this indiscernible damage was an argument between Rav Oshia and Rav Chia. So it's basically like wine that becomes tuma, or wine that wasn't mavashal because it's touched by a goy and it wasn't boiled, and it hasn't lost its qualitative value. It hasn't turned from wine into vinegar. It's still as high a caliber of wine. It's just unfortunately no Jew can drink it. So is that considered damage where a person has to pay for that, or is it just conceptual damage or real spiritual damage, but not amongst how people value things? So what does the Gemara do, Dory, is it says, okay, while we're on the subject of Rav Oshia and Rav Chia, the only reason I'm bringing Bava Kama is we all learned it as a group, is let's just teach you some other arguments the two of them had a discussion of. It goes into a whole lot of other subjects. So what does this have to do with Bava Kama? Because it goes on a tangent where it goes off the path and it says, since we're on the subject of Rav Chia and Osher, they didn't agree on many things. This is what they didn't agree on, and this is what they both hold. Dory, is it making sense to you?
Kind of.
Well, tell me what part isn't, because
I mean, carry on. I'm getting the picture.
okay, so what it does is the Gemara often uses an opportunity, like Lon said, to say it doesn't need to tell you. All you need to say is 3 stars come out, you start to say the Shema. But it's saying, listen, that time is synchronous to when we first started the Mishnah. It says, listen, we are in line with the Kohanim in terms of where to start the Shema. And when you end the Shema, we learn that whenever there's a midnight, the emphasis on the Mishnah more is when the time of Shema ends. And it's in any positive mitzvah where the deadline is midnight. You shouldn't drag it out to morning. Why? Because with regards to sacrifices, there's kares as a penalty if you consume it after dawn. If it's as far as Shema is concerned, well, you just have an opportunity loss. But it's serious enough that you should do it at midnight. In terms of are there opinions, Gavin asked me a good question where maybe there's a halfway mark. That makes sense. You don't have to go midnight to the dawn and go from the one extreme to the other, but it's generally a precautionary measure. You get what I'm saying? Because some of the fats don't cook until that period of time. So it says, since we're talking about midnight mitzvahs and the Kohanim and the emphasis on that, it says, well, funny enough, there's a correlation. When you're doing the earliest time for the Shema, you have to wait till 3 minor stars come out. Why 3 minor? Because when 3 big stars come out, it's much earlier. And in fact, the other day, I thought it was a star. It's the planet Mars. Sometimes you can't differentiate between a star and a planet because of the reflection. You really can't. The southern hemisphere is a bit easier. So in that case, we wait for the later time. And it said, since we're on that case, we want to learn something about the Kohanim. Since they have certain rules with regards to 3 stars coming out, let's learn about other halachas, because it's an organic conversation. It only was put in writing so we wouldn't forget. So the Tana wishes to teach us something else in passing. The Gemara says, namely, when the Kohanim who were tamei permitted to eat their teruma, they're in a state of impurity, when can they eat it? From the time the stars appear in the evening, and this is what the Tana means to teach us, that the atonement offering of a tamei person that they must bring on the day after the immersion does not hold back a kohen from becoming tahor in regard to tumah. So this is what it's actually saying in a very, very simple way. There's certain forms of tumah where immersion in a mikveh doesn't suffice to render a person fully pure. The person has to offer a set of sacrificial offerings on the day after his immersion to complete his purity, his tahara. There are 4 instances. There's a zav where Kohen has a seminal mission, a zava when she's during her period, his wife, etc. A woman who has given birth, or a matzorah. Everybody knows what a matzorah is?
Right.
Exactly. Brilliant. A person that speaks Lashon Hara. And it is a form of impurity. And you say, well, why is it their fault that they have to bring like an offering? Because many times it's not about being your fault, it's about being impure. And the fact of it is, Lashon Hara is something that is one's fault, speaking badly. It's not what you call a menstrual cycle that comes in that's just time bound. In fact, that is a problem. So, where do we see the stories right? In Christos 8b. So, in all of those standard cases, it doesn't help to have Tzeta Kochavim with the appearance of the stars. You know, you have to actually immerse before the appearance of the stars during that day, and then that evening, when the appearance of the stars, you've done your first phasing. The next day, you bring your offering, and then at the point where you bring your offering, you can partake of the korbanos, meat korbanos. This is different. This is basically a crop given to the Kohanim. Okay, and therefore, because it's a crop given to the Kohanim, they don't have to wait the next day before giving sacrifices, because even if it's not their sacrifice they're eating, they can't go in the temple area and partake of somebody bringing a chatas offering or get involved in any of that. They're not in a full state of purity, but their teruma, them and their wife, can partake of. So that's what it's trying to teach us, this law, that if as far as the teruma that they're entitled to as a Kohen, the fact that they've immersed themselves, when 3 stars come up, that doesn't bar them from being able to eat their teruma. But the immersion has to be done during the day, and at night 3 stars coming out. But the sacrifice isn't what holds them back. Okay? That's what it's meant to teach us. It's not like a standard sacrifice, even if it's not a sacrifice for their sins, but they're partaking of somebody else's sacrifice on the altar, on the Mizbeach. They can't do it. They can't eat in the temple area. So we need always a scriptural source for everything. So this is taught in the Brisa, and it says with regards to a Kohen who becomes impure and immersed himself, and it said, and when the sun comes down and the day has passed, vetaher, therefore he may eat from the holy foods. And what's the pasuk that it's from? In Leviticus, Vayikra chapter 22, verse 7. Okay. And what does that prove? It proves that the setting of the sun followed by his immersion holds him back from eating teruma. But once the sun is set and he's immersed himself, the atonement he has to bring the next day does not hold him back from eating teruma. But sacrifices, yes, but not the teruma. So the Gemara questions it because it's got strange wording. Okay, it's got Be'eta Shemesh, and it's got this funny expression in Aramaic, Hebrew, and the same in English. It says, and when the sun comes. So, Dory, when I say the sun comes, what do you think it means?
Means dawn.
Yes, it's very ambiguous. Doesn't mean when the sun comes up. Doesn't mean when the sun comes to set. What does it mean? The Gemara is saying, yeah, it's as clear as mud. We hear the pasuk, but the wording isn't clear. The wording hasn't clear. So the Gemara says, if you understand it wrong, you derive the wrong conclusion. Because if you're saying when the sun comes up, only then, because if you have to wait till the sun comes up, then it proves you have to bring the sacrifices and wait till the next day in order to be able to partake of the teruma. But if you say the sun comes down to set, that's proving the converse. You don't have to wait till day for your meat sacrifices in order to have the teruma. So how do we have a little bit of clarity as far as this is concerned? The Gemara says the answer comes from Rabbi Bar Rav Shila, who turned around and says it's the way you interpret the verse, the word. Because the word v'taher is almost what happens. It's a phase of what happens. But if you want it to be in the command form, you use the yud, v'yitaher, like lema kara v'yitaher. So what that would be is an instruction. So after the immersion, if the Kohen was commanded v'yitaher, he would have to do something. If a normal person is asleep and awake, is there anything they have to do for the sun to set, yes or no?
Nothing.
Nothing. It's independent of them. It happens to be where it's a phase that transpires and a period of time passes. But the word v'taher means after the immersion and he comes up, there's something required of him. And the fact that it uses v'taher and not yataher in the command form means there's nothing required of the Kohen. It's just a phasing of time. And v'taher refers to a person and an action, whereas v'taher without the yud is regard to an event. And it says it proves from there that the sun is set and the day has passed because nothing is required from the Kohen. There's no action orientation. Why? Because if you look at Adacher and Taher, the one is in Aramaic and Taher is in Hebrew, they both mean purified or cleansed. And because it's a common expression and it's idiomatic for a passing of time. At a certain period of time, you become pure, providing you've done the immersion for Teruma. It's not action orientated to bringing your sacrifice. But they learned that in Babylonia, in the West. And the Gemara often refers to Eretz Yisrael as the West because it's west of Babylonia. They didn't hear this by Rav Shila. What they had to actually use is they resolved it from a different brisa that said, a sign for this matter, meaning from the time that a Kohen who is Tameh may begin eating teruma, is the appearance of the stars. Okay? And that's pretty straightforward. And what does that mean when there's appearance of the stars? It's very clear. It means the setting of the sun. Clear as anything. They use a different brisa. Okay. Does that make sense? Guys, I'm sorry I had to do revision, but quite a few people weren't here. And is it clearer the second time? Tell me if you like it, you don't. I'm here to do what you want, you guys.
No, you've done a
Yep.
good job. It's not a simple thing.
Damon,
It's exactly
yesterday
like
you did it very
you said,
fast.
you've got to,
Pardon?
sorry.
Yesterday you did it very fast, so the revision is actually quite good.
You see, I'm trying to work out the pacing between retardedly slow and something that will hold your interest and cover ground, but not too fast. And I don't know what that is, Lance. I actually still, I'm not sure what it is. So if any of you
On the
ever feel
retarded
that
side,
it's
yeah.
too fast, you must slow me down and just say. But I don't want to. Sometimes I've been to Shiurim where they say the same thing 5 times. So I want to go fast and cover ground so don't lose interest. Because
Okay, I'll help you, David. I'll tell you what we want. We want a fast level for retards.
Okay, I'm the retard giving it, and the fast level will be for you guys. Now we're going to get into a complicated issue because there's 6 different opinions coming up. Okay, this is a simple one. All right, you ready? All right. So we're getting into this new issue, and the Gemara quotes the Mishnah's ruling and examines it. And it says the master, whenever it refers to the term a master, it's talking about a Tana. The master said in a Mishnah that the time we may begin reciting the Shema is from the time that the Kohanim who are Tameh may enter to eat their teruma. Okay? So the Gemara has got 2 phases to it based on the Mishnah. Dori, what are the 2 phases of the Mishnah in terms of times that you can see from what you remember we covered in the first day? Off the bat.
Sunrise and sunset.
Very good. So I should have been more clear. There's 2 things. When we there's 2 phases of the Shema. There's the evening Shema and the morning Shema. That's quite correct. My question should have been specifically regarding the evening Shema. We have 2 phases of the evening Shema. What are they?
Aren't there 3?
Not 3 opinions. The 2 major points of interest. Not the opinions.
Wasn't it one of them between twilight? Wasn't that one of them?
No, so the overall concept, Lance is right, there are 3 opinions. That in the second part of the Mishnah, the 3 opinions is when is the latest time for Shema. So the end of the Mishnah discusses what the latest time for Shema is. What does the first part of the Mishnah discuss?
Isn't it that you're supposed to start with mincha 1 hour, 40 minutes or something, or 40 minutes before
Okay, so
sunset?
Gavin's right in that the emphasis on the emphasis on the Gemara, on the first part of the Mishnah is when we start the Shema. There are different opinions, and the emphasis on the second part of the Mishnah is when we end the Shema. In other words, it's not about the amount of opinions. The two phasings are when is the earliest time we can start, and the second part of the Mishnah is when is the latest time we can end the saying of the Shema. What's the latest time? The commentaries in between, obviously, as Lance said, there are three. And that is Rav Eliezer that says in the first watch, which we said is the watch consists of 12 hours and there are 3 4-hour shifts, according to Rav Eliezer. And according to the sages, it's until midnight. And according to Rabban Gamliel, who said in response to his kids coming back from a wedding banquet, they hadn't done Shema, when can they do it? He said, if it's not yet dawn, you can do it. Now, our discussion was in terms of the ending, is we knew very, very clearly that it doesn't mean that Rabban Gamliel argues with the sages. Initially, it seems like he does. He doesn't agree. But he was asking it in context to what you call protect, to make sure his sons did it based on the unideal circumstance of which they came home after a function. But if you ask him when he agrees it should be done, they say preferably closer to midnight in case one falls asleep and doesn't have an opportunity to say it. And then it relates all the positive mitzvahs that are required by midnight should not be stretched until dawn, especially sacrificial-based mitzvahs by the Kohanim, because it can turn to kares for the participants of the meal. Does that make sense? So we just have to understand the Mishnah, then the Gemara is very easy. So now what we're going to go into is the earliest times that we're doing the Shema. And we've got 8 minutes left. Is Kevin left at this point?
I think is it. So, Damon, I think the earliest time is 6 hours after the start of the day, roughly after midday. And the last time is Plaga Mincha.
Yeah, so I mean, how this whole issue came up is that what's this issue at Shul, according to Rashi, is that there has to be a pasuk before the Shmone Esrei, the Amidah, and therefore they use Shema as the opportunity to do so, but it is recommended afterwards, according to the Rambam, on number 235 of the Shulchan Aruch, page 235, that all 3 verses are recited. Some say 2, because that last verse is independent, but most say 3. If it's before 3 stars come out, we're going to discuss the different times. Plaga Mincha and normal Mincha, we discussed there were 2 different vantage points of how that's worked, and we said that it was an hour and a quarter before Mariv is the earliest time one can say Mincha. That was the argument, Gavin. According to those that hold up Plaga Mincha, an hour and a quarter was the earliest time. And then Lance brought up a good point, as we say, but surely the best time is just after midday, which is known as Lance, about 6, what did we say it was? About 6 hours before, 6.5.
I think so, yeah, 6 hours.
6 hours before, it would make sense, because then the watch would come. The watch would be 2 days watches of 6 hours. In the first 6 hours, you would have Shachrit and Musaf. So that would make sense. And Lance said, well, why would anybody wait till last minute? Because surely that's less of a level. And what we said is, no, it would obviously depend on where you're holding, because some people figured it was a leniency to allow people to do it straight after midday based on their schedule. And in fact, that wasn't a stringency to ensure they did it earlier, and they weren't. And it's not like they lack being machmir by doing it Plaga Mincha. They're holding at different levels of priority. And what we ended up saying was the bottom line of it is forget about everybody's opinion. The whole point of doing having widened time gaps is I see everybody rush into shul, especially people that don't understand Hebrew. I've noticed more in Israel. They mumble through words, they clock out and they leave. So, I mean, if you love somebody and they've given you everything in your life and you can't wait to clock in and clock out and you don't understand the language and you're mumbling through words, you wasted your time. Okay, you've ticked boxes. I don't know what mentally ill boxes you've ticked, but you've ticked boxes. The right thing to do is choose a time where you're in the presence of mind. My personal time is when everybody's gone away for the day and left me alone. So I'll do it just before Mincha and Mariv back to back because nobody wants something from me. During a business day, if I daven Shachrit too late and people are starting to phone me and having issues, I'm concerned. My mind isn't on davening. So it's before I see people is great, and after they go away is great. But with me, I'm not an extrovert. When people go away, it's like clouds. It's a sunny day. So you can't go on me. You've got to go on you. All right. We'll do the new stuff tomorrow when Kevin's there. I just wanted you to share with me if the pacing makes sense, and it all makes sense to you, because you guys wanted a bit of break from Makot because eventually you didn't care if the Adim Zomimim died because you were dying of boredom. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the pace is fine, right? Pace is fine, yes.
Okay. Anybody got any insights or thoughts? Because I don't want to leave Kevin out and repeat it tomorrow. He's got to go to the dentist. That's a kapora for burning down a village. Anybody else got any insights? I'm listening, guys. You can teach me anything you want.
Yeah, Damon, yeah, sorry. I'm just having an issue with my computer. There must be some correlation between purity and saying the Shema if they're bringing this up. So maybe a person, because people make so many mistakes during the day, you don't have to worry about being spiritually 100% pure in order to say the Shema. I don't know. I'm just going off on a limb, but why would you put the two together?
Okay, they're putting the two together for two different reasons. The primary emphasis was the end of the Mishnah to say any mitzvah that had a midnight deadline, technically.
No, over and above that. No, I understood that. Over and above that. I'm giving another. Yes, I understood what you said. Over and above that. I'm just going on a limb here that maybe that's another reason.
I think definitely there are Kabbalistic and deeper ways to learn the Gemara. And probably one of them is that to be in a state of immersion or purity when you're saying the Shema is definitely preferable. If you see a best friend, and I'm not being crude when I say this, we don't understand spiritual impurity and maybe how off-putting it is in the spiritual world. Maybe it's like being covered in feces and hugging a best friend. He loves you. He just doesn't want to smell you and see you at that point. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you've got a good point. I don't know the impact of what it has in
Yeah, I'm just looking at it from that angle. Sorry,
because I think you're right. I think there's definitely a Kabbalistic element that there has to be a level of purity and sanctity. Often before I go for davening in the morning, I just have a shower. And before I go to Mincha and Mariv, I actually have a shower in the afternoon. I feel like a different human being. Really. Is that sufficient? I don't know. I don't
no,
know.
100%. All right. No, I'm just raising it. I was hoping that you had seen something.
Point.
I was hoping that you had seen something on it, but you haven't. It's fine.
No. But what you said
maybe
makes
somebody
absolute
raised
sense.
it.
Dory is a Cohen. I know you and Gavin both know this a lot, but I hope you do learn some things that we go through. And my sourcing is accurate. I generally remember most of the sources.
Thank you.
Sure. It's nice to have you on the share. And just have a good afternoon. I'm going to end off a little bit early. And when Kevin said, can we hit the new stuff now? It's going to get complex.
Yes.
All right. Cool, guys. Lovely to see you.
Was this the easy stuff?
Okay,
So
cheers.
Easy. This is easy. Cheers.
Can't wait.
Thanks, man.